Howdy everybody, this is Steve, KM9G. Today we're going to get the FT891 onto FT8. Wait, they both have FT8 in their name. Is that a coincidence? I think not. We're going to use the MFJ-1205 Digilink interface. This thing comes in a wide variety of formats to connect to a wide variety of radios and is very modular. So if you get one for your FT891 and then decide you don't want the FT891, you can reconfigure this and not have to go out and buy another audio interface. So very modular, very upgradable, very future-proof. Also, it's about $10 cheaper currently than the Signalink. Both of them will be linked in the description down below, so you can take a look and see which one works best for you. I have a video where I use the Signalink on the IC706, so you can get a feel for how well that works, or you can see the internals of the two of them side by side, video by video, if you will. Let's get started. Okay, this is Tio from the future here. I'm doing the editing on the video and there's a lot of information to cover here. I'm going to go ahead and put chapter links down in the timeline below. You'll be able to see those. There'll be notes in the description down below so you kind of can read along, follow along, whatever. There's also going to be some information on my website about this, but I got you covered. Let's go. All right, here's where we get into the fun part. We get the hardware. This is the MFJ-1205 audio interface, and it is already configured for 6-pin mini DIN. So that makes it the MFJ-1205MD6 for mini DIN 6. They also have this pre-configured for a bunch of other different radios, and this works very similarly to the way the Signalink works, where there is a chip inside that you can change out. Let's take a look inside real quick. This is probably one of the easier MFJ devices to get into because there's only one screw on each side. MFJ is usually pretty generous on the amount of screws that they give you. So inside we have a configuration chip. It's just a little mini PCB with some circuit traces routed back and forth on it. You could actually unplug that and just put jumpers in there. And then a magic cable from the radio to this device. And so you could easily switch this out to make this work with an ICOM or a Kenwood or an HT or anything that you wanted. And then even if you really wanted to get picky, you could just do it with audio in and out cables and roll your own and control your own PTT circuit or use Vox. Inside here, there's not a whole lot going on besides physical connections, USB cable. This is the C-Media Electronics audio chip, and these two here are isolation transformers, which keeps the computer signal out of the radio signal except for just the pure audio. So this is kind of like a choke to keep RF signals, to keep interfering signals away from signals of interest. So pretty straightforward on the inside, not a lot going on in there, and I like that. Simple is always better in my book. Okay, I feel like that's the wardrobe change between scenes there. Inside the box for the MFJ-1205, you're going to get an interface cable for your radio. On one side, you have an RJ45 plug that plugs into the back of the MFJ-1205, and on the other side, you'll have a plug that goes into your radio. This is a 6-pin mini DIN connection for the FT891 and also for a lot of other radios. And that interface cable is actually pretty close to being a standard. So on the back of the 891, you'll see that connector right there. That just goes like so. For the FT891, you're also going to need a USB A to B cable for cat control, so that goes in there. And then on the back of the Digilink interface, the MFJ-1205, the other end of that 6-pin cable with the RJ45 goes there. And inside of the box for the MFJ-1205, you get a USB cable to plug it into your computer. So then you take your MFJ's cable and your Yaesu FT891's cable and plug them into your computer. We got the studio in dark mode for this part of the video because this is a gorgeous display on this FT891. It looks great in person, it's hard to film, so it's kind of what we're working with here. Just to show you that there are no tricks up my sleeve, we're gonna go in and do a factory reset. You don't have to do a factory reset. I'm going to show you all of the settings that you need to do. I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. We're going to start out with 17-1, which is the reset choice. 17-1, we hit reset, push in the function knob, long press the function knob on all. You'll hear the relays click, the radio will reboot, and all of your settings are gone. So if you have settings, don't do a factory reset. All right, now that we are factory reset and we have everything back to the original factory conditions, we want to go back into the menu system, the big honkin' menu system, by long pressing the F key for, I guess F for function. That's what I always think of when I see the F key. We want to go to 5-6. We're going to set up our cat control stuff. 5-6, it's set for 4800 BPS. Really, you just want to know what this is set for, but I'm a speed demon. I want this at all the speed. 38400 is as fast as it goes. Next one up is 5-7, cat timeout timer. This is the amount of time before the radio will give up on the computer sending its signals. I'm going to go to 100 milliseconds because the computer isn't as fast as I am. Okay, cat RTS 5-8. I want to set this to disable. This is old school RS-232 stuff from back in the 1970s, 1980s PC stuff, PC days. And we aren't there anymore, but we have the legacy. That is now set to disable. I want to go to 712 for PC keying. And this is one of those settings that's already at the factory default of off, and we want to keep it at off. But we also just want to, cover all of our bases there. Go to 8.1 next. 8.1 is going to be data mode PSK. This radio has a built-in PSK modem. We want to switch this to others to tell it to don't mess with my data. Leave my data alone. All right, next up is 8.3, others DISP. Set this to 1500 hertz. You do this so that your radio and the waterfall display in WSJT-X agree. And we want to do the same thing for other shift right below it. Set that to 1500 hertz as well. All right, after that we want to go to 8.5, the next one down. This is the data lower side cut frequency, and we don't want any cut at all. It's currently set to chop off the bottom 300 hertz of your passband, and we want to set that to not cut anything off at all. WSJT-X is going to handle all of that stuff. We're going to go to 8.7, which is the opposite side, the high cut frequency. We want to set this to off. For this one to go to off, you got to go upwards. The other one you had to go downwards. So now those two are both off. We have the entire passband being presented to the computer. 8.9, data in select, factory defaults to rear. We want to keep it at rear. 8.10, data PTT select is DAKY. That's the name of the pin on the 6-pin port. And we just want to make sure that we keep that set. 8.12 is next up. Data beat frequency oscillator, data BFO. We want to change this to LSB. This is kind of funny because you take this and you turn it counterclockwise to go to upper sideband. Seems kind of backwards to me, but it gets the job done. And that's what we want. We want the job done. Next up, we go all the way down to 16.3. This is where we get into power level settings. This radio has a ton of different locations for power settings for different reasons, for different purposes. HF SSB power, that's not it. There's a data power, that's not it. It's actually HF power 16.3 that you want to set. This is a religious discussion. I have run my radio at 100%, 100 watts, whatever, and it has been fine. The fans come on. They do a fantastic job of cooling the radio down. It makes a lot of noise. You don't need to run 100 watts to do FT8, to do digital modes at all. So set this where you are comfortable. I am comfortable at 100, but you want to be sensitive to your hardware, your operating environment, and so forth. You don't want your finals to overheat and shorten the lifespan of your radio. So be mindful of this setting. And then 16.10 is your data mic gain. And I'm going to set this to 35. And then I'm going to go down to 16.14. And I'm going to set the data gain, because we like to name stuff, at 50. Factory defaults to 50. I'm going to keep it to 50. Excellent. That's all of the deep menu settings. Now we go into the soft menu settings. We press the function key briefly, short press, tap, if you will. We want to change the width, the WDH. This is the width of the signal that's coming into the passband. 2400 hertz is not big enough. We want to go as wide as we can, 3200 hertz. And when we get farther into WSJT-X settings, the radio will not allow you to go beyond 3000 hertz. But you definitely don't want it down at 500 hertz or some weird space like that, because you'll actually be distorting the signal and presenting less signal in total to WSJT-X. And this is what it looks like when you present less signal in total to WSJT-X. The signal gets all distorted, you lose the left and right sides of the incoming data, and you're not going to be able to make a QSO. So definitely check this width, and you have to check this almost every time you start the radio up. The next thing is that WSJT-X does not need any filters, so we want to make sure that IPO is turned off. We want to make sure that the noise blanker is turned off. Unless you have a very specific reason to turn that on, we want to leave that off. You want to make sure that the narrow and the notch filters are off, and we want to go to function 2 by pressing the function key one more time. And there's a whole bunch of stuff on here. We want to turn AGC off, and I will show you later on what we can do about that setting. And we want to make sure that DNR is off, DNF is off, contour is off, and that's it for the function settings. Let's get over to the computer and go through the computer settings. The first thing we're going to need software-wise is WSJT-X. There will be links down in the description as usual for all of this stuff. So just kind of watch and see what's going on, and then there'll be notes down below. And if you need to connect some of the dots, you can look at the notes and then look back at the video, and everything will make sense when we get to the end of it. This is the website that you go to download the software. And if you just scroll down the page, it will start telling you about some of the different releases that are available. There are releases for Windows right here, for Linux right below that, for Mac OS right below that. Download the one that is applicable to your operating system and follow the normal install procedures in order to get you to the other end of the install. I have already downloaded it and installed it on my machine. Let's go ahead and bring it up real quick. Here is WSJT-X up and running for the first time with zero configuration having been applied at this point. And you may get a box in the very beginning that says, "Welcome to WSJT-X. This is what it's all about." In the bottom corner, there's a check here to never display this again. At your discretion, go ahead and check that. And if you want to keep on seeing it, keep on seeing it. After you get past that, the next thing you're going to get is a, "Hey, I don't know what radio you have," error message. And there's going to be a couple of buttons. If you hit OK, it's going to bring you straight into your settings menu so you can configure your radio. And it's going to look a little bit like this. When we get into our settings menu, there's a couple of things that we need to do right off the bat on the front page. We'll go through these in order. So the first thing it wants is my call. My call is KM9G. Put your call in there and go over to the next field. The next field is your Maidenhead Grid Square Locator over here on whatsmylocator.co.uk. Fantastic website. Again, link in the description down below. I'm going to go ahead and put in my city and state, Wisconsin, and I'm going to hit search. I love when the map does that. It's going to zoom me into pretty much my rural area. And grid squares are actually pretty big, and these digits go on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And it'll actually get all the way down to on top of your head where you're sitting at the moment if you let it. But we only need the first 4. And WSJT-X is happy if you bring over the first 6. I'm going to bring over the first 6, EN35SN. And this actually gets me from Luck, Wisconsin, all the way over to Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is an hour and a half away. So it's like I said, it's a pretty big grid square. So grid square EN35SN, let's go back to WSJT-X. And we'll go ahead and paste in that grid square EN35SN. Perfect. Okay, there's a bunch of options on this page. This is what ham radio is all about, is the spirit of experimenting and learning and playing around with things and seeing what happens. If you hover over each one of these individually, it will give you some information as to what's going on with that setting. I'll show you the settings that I use. I like a blank line between decodes. I'm in the US, so I like distance in miles. I like to see my worked before status. And I'm going to leave this one off this time and see what it's about, because it's going to be my experiment for the day. Double click on call sets TX enable, so you can double click on a call on the left side of the screen and it will automatically start trying to have a conversation with them. And then I also do this allow TX frequency changes while transmitting. Sometimes I find that somebody's moved in on my signal, I need to move away. So that allows me to do that without having to wait for the time period to end. And that's it for the first page. Take a pause there if you want to copy some of those settings. And I'm going to go to the radio tab. Today we're working on the Yaesu FT891 and we're using the MFJ-1205 sound interface. So under rig, I'm going to drop this down to the end and pick FT891. They're in alphabetical order, so it's going to be towards the bottom. A trick for finding your serial port that you need to use to communicate with the radio is, again, those tooltips. If you just hover over that, it's going to give you some information about what card is underneath of that device. And in this case, it's a Silicon Labs CP2105 dual USB to UART bridge controller. And that's what's inside the FT891. The FT891 actually has 2 of those devices inside that both go over the same USB port. You want the lower one of the 2. So if this was USB 1 and 2, USB 7 and 8, you would want 7. You would want 1. In this case, it's 0 and 1, so I want 0. So that's a quick tip on how to figure out what serial port to use. When we were over at the radio earlier in the video, we set the serial port speed to 38400, the cat rate setting inside of the Yaesu menu. So we need to make sure we match that here. The rest of this stuff on the left-hand side, we can leave alone. Data bits default, stop bits default, handshake default, no DTR, no RTS. Under PTT method, push to talk method, we want to set that to cat. And then under mode, we want to set that to data packet. WSJT-X and this radio get along very well. WSJT-X will tell the radio, put yourself into USB data mode, and the radio says, okay. Some radios don't do that, and you have to set none or some other setting here. In this case, we just set it to data packet, and we're good to go. Under split operation, you can run this however you like. It's not going to hurt it to be in any of these 3 different modes here. I prefer to use rig control where possible. And what that does is it moves your transmit frequency on the radio so that the signal that you are transmitting out is in the center of your passband to make it that much better able to get out into the wild. And it will also put your rig into what's called split operation. So VFO A will be listening and VFO B will be transmitting, and it will change back and forth as part of the process. We're not ready to hit cat yet because for some reason, if we do this now, it's going to complain we don't have any audio settings, even though they're not technically related for this test. And it's kind of I think it's kind of a bug. So we're going to go into audio. We're going to set audio. And if you are on Linux, it will look exactly like this because I'm on Linux. And it will say also input. You want the one that says input. C Media Electronics is the name of the chipset that's inside of the MFJ-1205 USB audio device. On Windows, it might say USB audio device. It might say C Media Electronics. It might say USB audio codec. A quick way to figure out which one it is to drop this list down and take a look. Then unplug the USB cable from the MFJ-1205. Drop the list down again, and they should be gone. And then you know which ones they are. I'm going to pick the C Media input for input. And I know this is going to come as a surprise, but I'm going to pick the C Media output for output. And so now I've got those guys lined up there. There's a couple of other things under here. TX macros, I don't change. Reporting, I want prompt me to log QSO so that at the end of a conversation with a remote ham, it will actually pop up a dialog box and I can enter in some notes about the conversation that we had. And then I want to enable PSK Reporter spotting. This is going to take every signal that I receive and upload it to PSK Reporter for mapping purposes. And we'll take a look at that after we get some signals in. We don't have any signals to upload right now. And then we want use TCP IP connection. So if we use, there's 2 different choices. There's TCP IP or there's UDP. UDP, we just send the data. We don't care if it receives or not. In TCP IP, we send the data and we listen for an acknowledgement that it has been received. I'm going to go ahead and check use TCP IP. It kind of doesn't matter, but you can check whichever one you want. Outside of that, that's about it for settings. If you go into frequency here, you can add more frequencies by right-clicking and choosing insert. This would be how you would add the 60-meter FT8 frequencies. And those are published out on the web, so you can find those fairly easily. Now that we've got all the tabs figured out, let's go back to radio and let's hit test cat. With the FT891, I don't know why it does this, but you'll see I'm on 14076 right now. If I hit test cat, this will change. It changed over to 30 meters, 10136, which was where my radio was, but this thing didn't light up green. You can see that this one over here is lit up green with the S because I have split operation turned on. That's what that S is, and green means that we're successful, but this button doesn't turn green. Everything else works fine, so don't sweat the petty things. So let's hit OK here. Let's change mode over to FT8. And we can hear FT8 signals on the radio. And I'm going to go take a look at the waterfall. And we should start seeing some FT8 signals come in. On your waterfall, by default, for some reason, it doesn't show the entire passband. So I'm going to change this bins divided by pixel 2 to bins divided by pixel 5. And now we've got at least 3000 hertz, and our passband is 3000 hertz wide, so that's going to show us all of the signals. And you can see that we're getting decodes coming in behind the window here. Let me go back to that window, and there's all of our decodes. So that's fantastic. Now that we've got some decodes coming in, I have a couple more websites that I want to show you. One is you see this DT column over here. This is delta time. This is how far your time is different than their time. Anything in the 0.1 to 0.4 range, or I guess minus 0.4 to positive 0.4 range, is probably going to get the job done. But we were talking about websites, so let's look at 2 more websites. The first one I want to show you is time.is. And it says time.is. If you go to this website, it will actually tell you if your time is off or if your time is exact. Milltown is my internet service provider's location. I don't know why they're grabbing theirs. I'm not really that far away from Milltown. But my time is exact at 0.026 seconds off. So I don't have anything to worry about there. let's go take a look at display reception reports. We're already receiving signals and we are pushing them up to PSK Reporter. So we know that we're hearing well and we're transmitting over the internet. Let's get back to look at this system here. And let's find a clean spot on both sides. So each one of these horizontal lines is a 15-second period. As you listen for 15, you transmit for 15. This is part of the magic on WSJT-X. And you want to look for a spot that's open on both sides. And this one right here looks pretty good. So I'm going to click at the top with my right mouse button and select Set RX and TX Offset. And now I'm going to transmit and receive at 2494 is what I clicked on, close enough to 25 to be good enough. I'm going to come back over here, make sure the TX6 is selected, and it already is, and I'm going to hit Enable Transmitter. And the next period through, I'm going to start transmitting my CQ call. Okay, we've done one cycle of transmit. Let's see if we've got anybody who's noticed us yet. These green bubbles here with time indicators on them, those are telling me that those are people that have heard my signal. So my signal is getting out. This is fantastic. This means everything's working. If we go back to WSJT-X, we'll eventually get a QSO with somebody. Oh, we got somebody now. Okay, we got one. And the reason why I wanted to have that prompt to log QSO box checked is because I wanted to have this pop up. Under TX power, I'm going to put down the power that I use to make this conversation, and I'm going to check retain so that next time this box pops up, it's automatically there. And I like to put in what radio I'm using, FT891, and what antenna I'm using, DX Commander, because I frequently change radios and antennas. And this way I know, kind of where I'm at and what's going on. And this is pretty cool. So using the mode FT8 on the 30-meter band, I sent a +6 signal report and received a +4 signal report to somebody who is 1 grid square away in one direction. Pretty cool. Okay, we've got a couple more settings to go through on the radio hardware and the computer hardware over here. And what I want to point out to you is the slider over here on the left-hand side for audio. Earlier on in the video, we went through and we changed AGC to off. If you listen, what probably happened when you turn AGC off is that the signal came through really horribly distorted like that. And what we need to do is we need to back down the RF gain. You can see over here, when the signal is distorted, this is coming through red. So the outer knob, where your volume is the inner knob, and then the outer knob is your RF gain or your squelch if you're in a FM mode. I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn it down. And if I turn it all the way to the left, counterclockwise, you can see this going sideways. And I'm going to change the RF gain knob so that it comes up. And that right there is right where I like it, is somewhere around that tick mark between 60 and 80. I'm going to guess that's 70. And as long as it's not red, I'm happy. Now there's another setting that we need to worry about, and that is this power setting over here. I'm actually not going to use the power setting to change that functionality. And here's what we're going to do. We need to check on ALC. Let's get back over to the radio. I'm going to change this to the ALC, and I already have meter set as the fast button for A, but if you go into function 2, you'll see meter. If you press the function button once, you'll select it, you can spin over to ALC. Since I have this saved down here, if you just long press this button, it makes that assignment, and since it's already there, it didn't make it a second time, but I can assign it here. Now I've got 2 meter buttons. Hey, what the heck, let's do 3 meter buttons. Long press C, now we got meter, meter, meter. We got all the meters. So if I press A, it gives me the ability to pick meters. I'm going to choose ALC, and now we have an ALC meter here. In WSJT-X, I'm going to hit the tune button over here, which is going to put out a signal. And you can see my ALC is 1 bar. I'm going to change my transmit on the MFJ-1205, and you can see ALC rising up. I want that to be down to 1 bar like that. I'm going to turn tune off to give it a little bit of a rest. We're going to look at the MFJ-849 power meter over here. We're going to look at power. And we're also going to keep an eye on this ALC over here. I'm going to go back into tune, and you can see that I've got ALC of 2 bars now. I'm going to turn that down to 1 bar, and we're putting out 108 watts of power. I'm going to turn that ALC up, and that's transmit volume all the way up. We're at 109 watts of power, but we're splattering like crazy. because the ALC is clipping that off. So I want that ALC circuit to not clip in. So either 1 bar or maybe even no bars, if you can trust no bars. I'm going to turn that down. Yeah, I can't get it down to no bars. I can only get it down to 1 bar. There we go, 1 bar. Turn tune off, give it a little bit of a rest. And you can see the power fluctuates a little bit when I do that. We're at 89 watts, we're set to 100 watts, and that's kind of what happens because I don't want to clip the signal. And if we go into tune again, you can see that we're down to 1 bar on the ALC. One more setting you might need to do on your computer is to go into audio. I'm going to pick the audio controls. I'm going to pick sound settings. On output, USB audio device is the one in question. I have this set for 50%. I can move this all the way up to 100%. And if I go back over here and I hit tune, let's take a look at what the meters do, because the meters are not going to be happy. So now my ALC is off the charts and I'm putting out 109 watts. So if I turn this down, that's turned down as far as it'll go. Because this is turned down as far as it'll go, we're not putting out any wattage. But in order to keep the ALC circuit happy with the volume on the computer turned all the way up and the ALC turned all the way down, we're putting out hardly any power at all. 60 some watts. So I'm going to go back over to computer audio settings and I'm going to drop the volume down, and I was happy somewhere around 50%. And now I can turn the MFJ-1205's audio up going into the radio until we just start to see some ALC and then get it set right. We're at 108 on the MFJ meter and we're at 1 bar of ALC on the radio. So now we're perfect. Okay friends, there you have it. That is how you do FT8 on an FT891 with the MFJ-1205 audio interface. The ALC is probably the hardest thing to wrap your head around, but think of overdriving your speakers. Think of putting way too much audio power into your speakers such that you're flat topping. There's more signal going out than your speakers can handle. So normally they would come up and you'd have this smooth height curve, but with too much ALC, they're actually coming up and it's going over, but the ALC circuit's cutting the top off of every bit of your audio transmitting. And that's what the ALC does. It makes sure that you don't overdrive your transmitter on the way out the door by discarding signal. And you don't want discarded signal. So that's your ALC circuit. We'll probably do a video just dedicated to what ALC and AGC is in the future, so be sure you're subscribed for that. I hope that was as easy as mud for you. There is a list of resources down in the description below. There's also a checklist available on my website where you can make sure you have everything taken care of as you switch from voice modes to data mode. And there's also a list of all of the settings in the FT891 so you can write down what settings you have now so you know what to change back to when you're done doing FT8. So be sure to click the link for that and download that checklist. Hopefully this is super easy for you. In the meantime, there's a video right over here I think you will enjoy next. Thanks for being awesome. I'll be over there waiting for you.